Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to A to Z Running. Hi everyone, welcome to A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andi.
I'm Zach.
And today on the A to Z Running Podcast, we're talking about how to avoid injury due to training.
And on that note, your three things will be easy runs, neuromuscularity, and transitions.
Very good.
Not necessarily in that order.
And in the world of running, we've got crazy high schoolers. We have the most gorgeous track facility on the planet that's going to get to see some runners and so much more.
And so much more. So you need to follow on AtoZrunning.com. There's a word follow in the top, so it's easy to find. And subscribe on places like YouTube and other places where sound can reach your ears and A to Z Running content can reach your eyes, because that is how you will know what's going on. Also, that's the easiest way for you to then get involved yourself and do things like comment, ask questions, share your thoughts and experiences and such, because then we can enjoy it all the more. Like this question, this was actually a follow-up question from a recent episode. So Anne at Margs and Marathon asked about the pace conversation. So we had Andrew Bikema on. How many races has he paced, Andi?
40 plus.
40 plus. So he knows about pacing, which is huge, as we've talked with so many of you recently about how valuable pacers have been in your experience. Carl, appreciate that comment as well. And Anne was asking the question about, what do you recommend then for how you kind of know what you can pace? You know,
right.
If you want to pace something, how do you know what pace you should do? And Andrew had great advice on that.
Right.
He said that you should try to run the pacing of about a minute per mile slower than what you could run the race.
Mm-hmm. At the very fastest. Like you want to have it be maybe even a minute and a half to give a buffer, because you want to be able to comfortably pace someone to their goal if you're going to be completing the whole marathon. Now, there's other scenarios like in track and field where
if
you'll
you're the
drop
world
out,
record attempt,
you'll drop out at like 800 for 1500, things like that. But like if you're going the full marathon distance, that's what Andrew suggests. And we actually put together, because you guys have so many great responses to that episode, I put together some tips. So I will link to that at AtoZrunning.com, or you can just find it if you go to the blog. It's one of the top blogs right now. So yeah, tips for being a pacer, which is a really great opportunity, and we really enjoyed that conversation with Andrew.
Absolutely. Speaking of Andrew and Rivertown races and
Yes.
other free race entries,
you have a few days to still enter that contest. So all you have to do, there's two things. So subscribe to A to Z Running. You'll get great discount codes and information.
and it's free.
It's free. So be part of the A to Z Running community. So subscribe. And then the second thing is sharing how someone helped you in a race. And you can do that by messaging us, commenting on the blog, commenting on social media. That will enter you in this giveaway for an entry to Rivertown races, which is April 24th. And if you can't, like if you aren't able to do that race for some reason, we'd still love to hear how someone helped you in a race. And that will encourage all of us to hear from you.
That is the truth. So do that, and do that soon so you can get entered to win. And on that note, we've got to talk about more things in the world of running up next. Well, to get things started for our World of Running segment, let's talk about high schooler Hobbs Kessler again. So
Great topic.
If you haven't remembered, Hobbs Kessler is the Ann Arbor, Michigan native who ran an indoor mile record for high schoolers in a time of 3:57 back in February. Not too shabby. Well, this time on Saturday, March 27th, this would have been in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina then, he ran a 2-mile race. This is one of these, like, get all the fast high schoolers together to run against each other kinds of things. They're calling this one that was a USA Meet of Champions. And in doing that, he ran the 2-mile. He ran it in 8:39. So, do the math a little bit. That's fast. Okay. And he is now the fastest Michigander at that time. That means he's faster than the likes of Dathan Ritzenhein and those kinds of folks. And that's not saying something small,
right,
because those people are fast. So he did that, and it's the number 4 all time as well.
Yeah, and we want to talk about him because we think that he's a great up-and-comer to keep your eye on. He also closed in a 55. Smoking close.
So he's got wheels. Not only can he run fast times, but he can beat people in races. And that's very exciting to watch.
Next up is a marathon that happened in Virginia. It's the Strider BQ Marathon Invitational. And Team Logan, whom you may know because we've had Dr. Bill Johncock on the show twice. One time because we talked about the father-son duo teams. He pushes his son, and together they ran a time this weekend of 3:25:40. That is a Boston qualifying mark as a duo team, and that is their PR as a team. And we also had him on talking about foot health, so we'll link to that. That's actually one of our most popular episodes here at A to Z Running, so you'll want to check that out too. Lots of great information about foot health. So together, we want to congratulate Bill and Logan, Team Logan, on their big PR and qualifier. And it's also relevant to another hero we have in the world of running, and that's Dick Hoyt, who just recently passed at 80 years old. And they did this run in honor of Dick because he was an inspiration to them. He competed as a father-son team with his son as well, Rick, who's a quadriplegic, and they did over 1,000 competitions together.
Wowzer.
Yeah, so that was like marathons, multiple triathlons, and they ran a personal best time as a duo team of 2:40:47.
So that's Dick
Faster
pushing
than
Rick for a full marathon.
That's faster than my marathon time. I think faster most people's marathon times. So incredible. And not only that, it was all about like what they could do together. And something that Mr. Hoyt said to the Globe in 1990, all the way back in 1990, is when we're out there, there's nothing I feel I can't do with Rick. Like together they're unstoppable, and they really did demonstrate that and inspired a lot of duo teams, including Team Logan.
So reaching a little bit further back, on March 21st in London was the British Marathon Championships, and this would have been for their Olympic trials then. And these kinds of things are always interesting to see because who comes out, who has the race, and as you might guess, with the marathon especially, you really can't predict. You know, we see this in the USA every marathon trials. You cannot predict who those three or so are going to be. And this time there was a surprise winner of the British trials as well.
Yes, there was. Christopher Thompson, he's been on the running scene for a very long time. In fact, in 2010, he won the silver at the 10K in the European Championships.
That's a silver behind Mo Farah.
Yeah, and Mo is, the champ. So, yes. So he's a name that many Brits recognize, maybe many of you recognize, and he had a big week, and he ran a personal best time, 2:10:52, and his previous PR was 7 years ago.
Whoa.
Yeah, and he'll be turning 40 next month, so by time the Olympics comes, he'll be technically a Masters runner.
So there's hope.
And he's got dad strength because earlier that same week, he had their first kid. Actually, I don't know if it's a boy or girl, but they had their first kid.
And then ran a huge lifetime PR at 39 years old. This guy.
I know.
Everything old is young again. And he is a good example. Wait, he's not old. He's not old.
He's not at all. No, that's not old. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of times, like, people will look at like, someone who's a Masters runner and say, are they going to compete for the spot on the Olympic team? Like, it's questionable. Are the young bucks going to come in and beat them? And then there he is.
There he is.
Yes.
And he did beat some of those young bucks, namely in second place, Ben Connor, who also has the world Olympic time. So Ben Connor being second in the race is going to go as well.
Mm-hmm. And then for the women, I got to scroll down for a minute here. Stephanie Davis won in a time of 2:27:16. And something interesting about her is that she just started running marathons. It's not even been 3 years. And she now is the top Brit runner.
Okay. That's not too shabby.
Not too shabby at all. And she's the only one to have qualified within the Olympic standard.
So these are fast times, and with the Olympics looming, and the Olympic marathon especially, as we're thinking about these distance runners, it's no small thing to have opportunities like this to get the big ones racing against each other. And you can see, people are coming out of the woodwork. It's going to be an interesting year.
It is very exciting. And another thing to look forward to is being able to see people run on the new renovated Hayward Field track, the historical Hayward Field track.
It's not historical anymore. They completely demolished and rebuilt the entire thing. This isn't just renovated. They have created what must be the finest track and field facility on the planet.
It's gorgeous.
Rivaling any of those Olympic stadiums out there for sure, if not better. Certainly on U.S. soil, this takes the cake.
Mm-hmm. So we're excited that they're going to be debuting events there, and you'll see some amazing track races happen. In fact, a lot of it is an attempt to get qualifying marks for the Olympics. And the first one will be April 24th, at least of their gold events. And we're excited to see who's going to be running. I haven't seen any declarations yet, but I'm sure it's going to be good.
Definitely will. So we'll keep you posted on those things and many more soon. Well, as promised, for our main topic here, we want to focus on avoiding injury. So we've talked with you, as we mentioned with our previous episode with Adam Homolka, about prehab and specifically then preventing injury. Now we want to focus on the actual training you're doing and how to do it in a manner that helps avoid injury. And this is a challenging and complex topic because naturally now it involves everything you might possibly do in training. So we're not going to try to tackle every single thing, but we are going to focus on a few of the big ones, and that is our 3 things for this episode. As mentioned, we're going to talk about easy running, we're going to talk about transitions, and neuromuscularity, which may not be a real word, but I've said it. And
so it must be now.
Stay tuned for the message that we have for you on those 3 things, and we'll summarize it all up in the end just in case you missed it.
And why do we want to talk about avoiding injury? Well, because we know that consistency over time is what's going to help us get the most out of ourselves and help us realize our potential, but also it's more fun to not be injured and to feel strong. So all of these are great reasons to tune in and to listen to these 3 things.
So here we go with number 1, easy running. What is it that we want to say about easy running?
Do it.
Do it easily.
Take it easy. And it's great because this has actually been a trend, Zach. I know you're not on social media much.
It's not been a trend. It is a thing that's always been a thing.
So I feel like everyone's really talking about it right now, taking the easy run easy, and it's good advice to be listening to. I know that there's trends and fads and things that go along, but this is something that has remained consistent. It's just getting more well-deserved recognition right now.
Just means that people are somehow picking up on what Arthur Lydiard was talking about in 1956 and somehow made its way 70 years later to us. So yes, the thing here though, and this is what really is confusing about the concept when you hear people talking about it, when they say things like easy running. In your training, there are days when you're supposed to run easier and days when you're supposed to run harder. The definition of what it means to run easy on those days is far more vague than the hard ones. That's just the way these kinds of things work. You know, hard running is like tempo pace for 8 miles. And so it's very clear what you're supposed to do. Or 10 by 400 meters at 5K pace. Very clear what you're supposed to do, right? And then they say, but on Tuesday, run easy for an hour. Well, what does that mean? And so the message here is that you need to run easy enough to be able to run hard without any kind of interruptions. So the easy running is supposed to be the meat of your training. You know, it's going to sustain you over time, but you have to do it only so much as your body's able to give. And the number one problem that we see when we're talking with athletes about their training is not that they're doing something wrong with those hard runs. It's that they're going too hard on the easy runs. And unfortunately, we can't give you a specific definition now to tell you what that easy means because it's a moving target in many instances. But a quick example is if your marathon pace is, say, 7 minutes, and then you say, I'm running easy when I'm running 7:30, I will tell you, no, you are not. It's too close to you can't possibly say, I can run a really hard marathon in 7-minute pace and run a really easy hour and a half in 7:30. That doesn't make sense mathematically, certainly physiologically. So that's what we're talking about when we say easy runs need to be a little bit easier, but it's also too hard of a thing to just give you like a straight number. So instead, adopt the mindset of, it's probably better to just run easier. Default to the easier side than the harder side for those easy days. And if it's a little too easy, that's okay because over time you're going to be able to go harder. You're going to be able, because as you gain fitness in those things, Don't worry about that. Instead, stay healthy and run
And
easier.
Zach, remind us, what is the goal of your easy runs?
To run easy.
No, I'm saying like in the big scheme, in the big picture, why do we run easy runs?
Well, fundamentally, with all things aerobic, the goal is every effort is supposed to move your aerobic capacity up a little bit further. And the easy runs are a really important part of that if they're long enough. So like easy half an hour run doesn't do much for your aerobic capacity. Easy hour and a half run makes a big difference. But in that time, you're trying to essentially get as much as you can out of the time you're running while being able to run hard the next day. And so you have to find the balance of running easy enough that the next day you're fully recovered, able to run hard, and run long enough to do that.
Yeah.
So these aren't simple things, but that's again why the message needs to be just something very simple, because the training is complex, and that is then slow those easy runs down. If you are struggling with any concerns health-wise, or if you just are not quite sure, slow it down a little bit. No harm.
Very good. The next one is transitions. You were going to say the transition to the transition.
I was going to do something far more that they didn't need to hear what I was going to say. Go ahead.
All right. So transitions. We talked to Adam Homolka about transitions, and he has identified it as a place where many injuries happen. So we're looking to avoid injuries, of course, and that's what this whole topic is about. So what can we do during transitions to avoid injury and maybe a shock to the body that could cause a problem?
Yeah, obviously it's going to depend on the kind of transition you're talking about, but in all things, ease into it. That's the message. Whenever you're making some kind of change in your training or in your structure in any sense, ease into that change. For instance, if you're going from just kind of running casually, like I don't have a big goal on the agenda, so I'm just kind of running here and there, and then now I have a training plan that's structured and I'm working toward a goal, don't just jump right into that plan. Ease into it. If it's calling for different kinds of runs, if it's calling for more running, any of that kind of stuff. So certainly easing into volume changes is a key thing, but easing into intensity changes is too. So if you go from, I've just been running easy to now I'm going to do some tempo runs. Well, don't do your first tempo an hour as hard as you can do a tempo effort. Give yourself some slack for those first couple, and that's entirely okay. And then the same thing applies if you've been doing a lot of training, but it's mostly like threshold or steady running and a lot of volumes and such. And then you want to throw in some interval workouts. You haven't done those in a while. Don't go out there and say, my 5K goal, my 5K goal is X pace, so I'm going to do that in 400 repeats. No, don't do that. Just ease into it. And maybe do a fewer repeats as well, just to make sure that it's not ruining your body in the process. One of the things that Adam talked about, by the way, with these transitions and changes is the thing like changing surfaces, which matters quite a bit. So when we go into winter for the first time, that's a time when we see a lot of injuries. Also, when we come out of winter, we see a lot of injuries again. For instance, you're going from a lot of like indoor track running or treadmill running or something like that, and then you say, oh, the trails are clear.
They're opened up now.
Gonna hit the trails.
Yeah.
Those mountain bike trails that everyone loves to run on. That's great. Not for an hour hard, though, for your first time.
I think it's hard as runners, Zach, when we are people in general. Like if you're a distance runner, there's part of you that's really ambitious and takes on and tackles challenges. So a lot of us were like, oh, awesome. We're on vacation now. We're going to do our long run on this really cool trail for an hour and a half. And it's like, well, I haven't been doing trails. And even though, yeah, I might be fit, I'm not ready to do an hour and a half in trails. So I need to split that up. Maybe do part of it in the trails and part of it on that paved part. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are hard for us as runners because of our ambition. And yeah, I'm talking to myself here too.
And there's so much there, because it's not just we're talking about the trails, but it can even just be running roads that are hilly when you've been on a flat treadmill for 2 months. And so then you go and you try to run roads that are just mildly rolling hills, and suddenly you've got a sore Achilles, like someone sitting here. And that, of course, is the natural consequence of just doing a little too much too soon.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of runners who like to do things like, as soon as the grass is clear, I like to run barefoot in the grass. And so they'll go and try to run half an hour barefoot in the grass. Well, if you haven't run barefoot in months and you try to do half an hour, the muscles in your feet will not thank you for that.
Right.
So maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes first.
I do want to mention this because it's so common. Also, beach running. It's very different. And running on dunes is also very different.
Yeah, all these kinds of things.
I can attest to that.
So the transitions matter. And when you're making the transitions, comfortably ease into it. And here's the thing. If you're doing something different and it's not a change or transition, it's just an anomaly, something, suddenly I'm at a beach and I'm going to run on it, but then, for the next 3 months, I'm not going to be at a beach again. Don't just go crazy and say, I'll be fine because I'm not going to do this again for a while, so I have time to recover. Because if that time to recover means you have to take a week off of running because you screwed up your feet on the beach, or you ran, a 3,000-foot mountain up and down early one morning when you were a camp counselor in Alaska, and then you couldn't run for a week.
Calling me out?
No surprises there. I'm calling you for making me do that as well. Well, that's kind of how this goes. So we need to ease into things. Our body does not like to make dramatic changes in any capacity because our bodies love routine and structure. So even our musculoskeletal systems form to the things we're doing, and they do it fairly quickly. It doesn't take long for your body to get into a kind of rut. And so when you're breaking anything in that rut, do it gradually.
That's a good one.
So number 3, which is one that Andi and I love to talk about as runners who love to do these kinds of things. Number 3 is my made-up word, neuromuscularity, which really we're just talking about neuromuscular activation.
Which is real.
That's not a made-up word. So this is in concept. Let me just briefly mention that neuromuscular activation is the concept of trying to get your neurological control of your muscles firing at high capacity. So it's like, in a general sense, it's like a sprint. A sprint is a high level of neuromuscular activation. A jog is a low level of neuromuscular activation. And so you're trying to get at that higher level of activation when we talk about this concept, and you're trying to do it often. Regularly, not often is not the right word there, regularly throughout the year. But you have to be very careful with how you go about these kinds of things because you really don't want to be just going out and doing sprinting all the time either, which is a problem.
Right. So we talk about doing strides, and we talk about doing short strides during your run. I know there are many ways that people advise that you do strides. Here at AtoZrunning, we advise to do strides within your run because it helps you neuromuscularly throughout the entire run. You'll have better form. You're training your body to run better, to feel better, and to, of course, avoid injury. Because if you're running more properly, you're going to be avoiding injury most likely.
Yeah, and there's something too. So, of course, we're not talking about speed training. That's not that's not the goal with these strides throughout the year kind of thing. If you're doing a 5K in 4 or 5 weeks and you need to do some speed training, that will look a little differently with how you do the strides. But for any runner, and I'm literally saying any runner on purpose, if you're doing marathoning, ultra marathoning, whatever you're going to do, the capacity in your legs to run at high levels of economical running is so important. And that's what the neuromuscular activation is helping to achieve, higher running economy. And so that's why it's valuable for anyone to do it, but it's important in how you do it. And that's why we have, as we've studied things like what Lydiard wrote about this and so many others, Jack Daniels as well, that the easiest way to do that on your body without sacrificing the kind of training you're doing, without causing any kind of higher risk of injury, is to sprinkle these strides in throughout an easy run, like an hour to an hour and a half of easy running with maybe 8 to 10 strides throughout.
Right. And they should be taxing you. You shouldn't be feeling crazy afterwards. This is not something that's supposed to make you sore. Well, I guess the first couple times you might if you haven't done them in a while.
You might, because you're forcing your muscles into a capacity they're not used to. Remember that whole transition thing.
Right.
And so that's, again, why you would need to ease into it, because if that is something new to you, don't go straight into interval hard workworkouts without doing some good gentle striding. Don't go into strides without doing, a couple light accelerations. You've got to just be very intentional about if you're going to add something new and how you make the change, but keep in mind the importance of some of these factors. And especially if you're doing it year round, then it's something that is much more, it's a part of your structural system. You don't have to experience a significant change to throw strides in.
And this doesn't really have to do with your actual running and training. So I know I'm deviating a bit, but before we run, we do drills oftentimes, and that helps us neuromuscularly too. So especially if you're doing a lot more of the speed training and maybe you haven't been doing strides in a while and you want to make sure that you're activating correctly and that you have just that body awareness, drills are a great way to prep your body to do that. So we have a lot of work on this. We talk about it quite a bit, but I am going to put a link to those drills because I just am a firm believer in teaching your body how to have these neuromuscular connections. That's your brain speaking to your body, and having good communication there, as in any relationship, is very important.
Absolutely is. So while those are your 3 things, we do have one more thing, because you got to at least mention in general the importance of, especially when we're talking about avoiding injury, of being intentional with your training.
Yeah.
In other words, having a plan and executing that plan as it is planned.
Right. And I know, like, not everyone is looking to gear towards a goal race. Many of you that are listening might just want to do some running and not really focus on any racing or even on progression and speed or anything like that. It's still important to have an idea of what your purposes are, and then also keep at least somewhat of a track so that you're not going to spike and get injured. Or maybe if you like stop running altogether, you don't have consistency, then you're going to lose it and you're going to be frustrated coming back to the sport again.
Yeah, and there's a lot there where, there's certain good things to have just as a part of kind of your structure in a general sense. And those things, regardless of how you're training and what you're training for, good to have as a part of it. Keep that in your plan. But there's something too, and I know the attraction at a cognitive level. I understand why there's an attraction to this concept of like the challenges. Personally, I don't empathize. I don't understand why people do stuff like that. But many people here's something interesting. I'm going to do this. So, I'll run another mile every day for 31 days until I'm running 31 miles. Wasn't that Des that did that?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I respect
don't get
Des
it.
quite a bit, but that was a little bit of a risky thing.
Well, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But
Yeah.
the point here is that those things can be fun. Those are also the kinds of things that put you in the most vulnerable states, because you're doing something that's unfamiliar, or you're doing something more dramatic. All of those kinds of things. It's like, this is a really crazy hard thing, so I'm going to do it. Okay.
Again, the personality of the runner, tackling challenges and thinking that we can do it. That's part of our personality, which is a good thing. But then also we have to be able to put checks and balances on ourselves so that we can avoid injury.
And I always have to ask the question, if you weren't posting anything about it on social media, would you still do it? Because don't let social media define how you pursue the things that have to do with your health and wellness.
Yeah. So what's best for you, not what's best for the gram.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Andy's dropping kernels of wisdom.
Well, it came from you first.
Yeah, one thing there in general, when you're looking to pursue your training in all capacities, this is kind of that underlying facet that goes everywhere. Understand that the training you're doing today should not be based off of what you want to be later in the future. The fitness you want to have in the future should not define what you're doing in this exact moment in terms of how hard you're running and how long you're running. What you're doing today has to be based off of how fit you are right now and what your goal is for the immediate future as you're progressing toward the long-term goals.
Absolutely. And I like to put it this way because it makes sense to me, but hurrying. Sometimes when I'm training, I feel like I'm hurrying to the finish line. And
Are you saying hurrying?
Hurrying, yes.
I keep hearing
Hurry, hurry.
What does it mean to hurr?
And yeah. So hurrying is a state of frenzy for me. That's kind of what I imagine hurrying to be. And that is not a great place for me emotionally, mentally, or physically. My body is tight. So if I'm hurrying in a race, it's not helpful. So when I think about training and the longevity of it, I don't want to hurry to my destination because that brings on all kinds of anxiety. Instead, I want to, of course, run in that moment, and I want to train where I'm at to get to where I want to be. Yes, I have a vision. Yes, I want to get to that place, but I know that it's going to be a step-by-step process.
Yeah, as my coach Barry McGee and before him Arthur Lydiard loved to always say, those who strain in their training will strain their body. So instead, train, don't strain.
Train, don't strain. That's a good one.
It's good wisdom. Not my wisdom. That's Barry McGee right there.
I like it a lot. So we did talk about periodization in running. So if you're wondering a little bit more about these periods of running and how to lay out training, we have information on that, but we also train runners. So if you need a coach, we still have openings. So if you'd like to contact us, of course, feel free to do so. And we'd love to help you out.
AtoZrunning.com/coaching if you want to learn a little bit more before reaching out. But inevitably, the easiest thing to do is send us an email, and we'll chat with you, and we'll see where you're at, whether we can help, and all of that kind of stuff. So, in summary, your 3 things. Remember to slow down your easy runs, ease into transitions, and maintain regular neuromuscular stimulation.
Very good. And that's how to train to avoid injury. We've talked a lot about avoiding injury in general. So I'm going to link to 3 episodes for you. One was our recent podcast with Adam Homolka of Endurance Rehabilitation. That's talking about like prehab. Like, what can we do to avoid injury doing prehab work? We also talked to Bill Johncock, who we mentioned earlier, the father-son team. He also is a podiatrist specializing in running, and he spoke with us about foot and ankle health. So I'm going to link to that, as well as Megan Featherston of Featherstone Nutrition. She talked to us about nutrition and running, and that's a great one to listen to as well, because you can help yourself avoid injury by feeding your body what it needs so that your bones are strong enough, that you're delivering enough oxygen while you're training. All these are key components to avoiding injury.
Absolutely. So just remember, because you don't want to miss any of the great content coming out of our mouths and our fingertips typing, go to AtoZrunning.com, click the word follow, and because we don't want to miss any of the good things going on in your mind, comment, question on all the places where you can find us, and we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And just one final reminder, if I can do another plug, we do have that contest going on until April 1st. So that's the deadline for it. If you'd like to submit, all you have to do is subscribe and then tell us a story about how someone has helped you in a race, either a pacer or someone else.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon.